Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Dan, and this is Forlorn Hobbies. Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I will be carrying on with part 2 of my Inspiration on Your Doorstep mini-series. This series focuses on a local landmark. In this case, it is Conisbrough Castle in South Yorkshire, and the inspiration that can create in terms of hobby drive and how I can attach historical kind of inspiration to my tabletop experience. Now, part 1 is available. I will link it in the description, and it is also part of this playlist. So please watch that first if you want to get the background information, because that's kind of the historic nitty-gritty meat to the project, as well as briefly covering the struggle for choosing a gaming system, in this case Baron's War, and a brief army list building. Now, this episode will focus on getting the project underway. Now, I have split this into at least 2, maybe 3 sections, where this episode will cover the lowest rung on the ladder, or the serfs and peasantry, and then in future videos we will move up to the men-at-arms and knights and characters that will be leading the retinue. The 2 sets that I will be focusing on today are the unarmed spearmen and the peasant archers from Footsore miniatures. Now, these miniatures are of a high standard, and I'm very happy with the casts of them. There's minimal flash and cleanup required. The only concern looking at the spearmen is the delicateness of the spear provided, and the posing of it means I'm going to have to drill through the hands and feed it through. Now, I can almost guarantee with my sausage-like fingers and grip that these will inevitably break in that process, so I'm going to save myself some time and just use brass rod spears, because these are more durable instead. Now, moving on to the archers. Again, these are absolutely fantastic sculpts. Minimal flash and cleanup required, and the detail is very crisp on the model, so I'm looking forward to painting these. Now, just going to clean them up with a pair of clippers, just to get them ready and put them on the bases provided, ready for painting. Now, I had ordered these in timely fashion as usual, because less than a week later they announced plastic peasants for Wargames Atlantic, and no doubt they are incredible looking from the pictures I've seen, but because I've already ordered these, I'm just going to soldier on. But I will inevitably buy the plastic set for a future project. When it came to painting these miniatures, I wanted to have a very earthy feel to the miniatures, because these are representing the serfs and peasantry of the Lord's retinue. And looking at the kind of colour palettes, even though the Middle Ages is known for its vibrant and bright colours amongst the upper echelons of society, I thought that the more subtle and earthy tones are more fitting for a grubby peasant in the fields that is just called up to serve their lord in a time of need. Now, I wanted to keep the colour palette across the miniatures very minimal, although have some variation in the ways that this was applied. So I've settled for kind of an earthy green and brown. So I'll keep the palette the same across the miniatures, but I will obviously add variation. So some might have green tights or hose as they were known, and others will have green kind of shirts or kind of head coverings. Now there are several sculpts that also have kind of an overcoat on, and I wanted to obviously reflect the Lord's heraldry in this so that they can be identified on the tabletop and in the battle. Now, uniform wasn't a thing back then. You would obviously have your heraldic devices that would be identifiers, but the retinues normally just turned up, especially the peasantry, in their everyday garb, what bits of equipment that they could kind of salvage and find. So there wasn't any kind of uniformity that you'd have as you got into a more professional army era, such as like the Roundheads or even Napoleonics with all their vivid uniforms. However, I like the cohesiveness of appearance, so I wanted to try and associate these models, or these peasants, to the leader. So I have opted to have a small kind of crest of the simplified arms, in this case the Warrenne arms. Now, instead of doing all the checkers of yellow and blue especially on the small kind of shields that I've done on their clothing, I opted to use the half blue and yellow alternate arms that were on one of the decal sheets for the De Warrennes, and I've just done this very subtly kind of on the chest and then mirrored it on the back, where they just have their own kind of robes on, or if they have an overcoat, I've just done half and half to simplify the process. Now, going ahead to future videos, I will obviously, the more important the unit or even character is, the more intricate this detailing will become, and also cleaner. But as they are just peasants, I wanted to keep a very subtle, muted, dirty kind of aesthetic to the yellow and to the blue especially, so it looked like it was worn and haggard and just thrown on, that had been, used many times before, rather than a well-kept, maintained, even new piece of equipment. Throughout medieval Europe, and specifically England, the main role and responsibility of the serf class was that of an agricultural provider, where they worked the land for the lord of the manor that owned the land. Now, this wasn't necessarily just farming, this was mining, lumber, foraging, etc. However, in return for that service, it was the responsibility of the barons and knights to offer protection. But the serfs would obviously have to support and follow their barons when called upon. This is based on the rationale that serfs and freemen worked for all, while the baron and knight fought for all, and the church prayed for all, so that everyone had a place within the realm under feudalism. Now, the serfdom differs from what we perceive as modern slavery definitions because the serf was not owned as an individual, they belonged to the land. They could obviously be exchanged as part of that land, but they had rights for land, and food produced on certain fields would be for them, but they obviously had the priority of maintaining the lord's estates first. Now, when it came to wars, there was wars fought by the peasants for lords in their baronial disputes, but there were also peasantry uprisings. I mean, Simon de Montfort led a great peasant army in his struggles against the crown, and the peasantry were used as a way of bolstering numbers and kind of showing vast support for certain causes. When it came to the equipment that these serfs would use when called upon to fight, it would most likely be their everyday farm tools, pitchforks, hoes, that kind of equipment, clubs. However, the richer the lord was, the more he would be able to provide kind of from an arsenal, should we say, or an armory. So they could have spears, and obviously bows were a staple of hunting. Most Englishmen knew how to fire a bow at that time, so the use of archers was quite predominant as well. So with this kind of force that I'm building, I wanted my levy spearmen to be spears just because I prefer the aesthetic look of a specific armed unit, and then I will be heavily using archers as well because I want to kind of recreate a realistic kind of structure to the force where there's a small amount of knights following the lord, there's a number of hired soldiers and guards that would be responsible for defending his keeps and his estates, and then more widely speaking, a bigger levy that makes up the bulk of the force, either through archery or through further spear or unarmed kind of improvised weaponry support. So that gives a good kind of representation overall of the way that these kind of minor disputes in medieval England were fought, and I hope to replicate that on the tabletop. Now, before we get to the final reveal of these miniatures, I just wanted to reflect and offer some final thoughts on where this project is going. Now, I am really enjoying painting these models. They're very nice and crisp, and the details are excellent. But there probably will be a bit of a gap between this episode and the next episode. Now, I will try and get it out in the new year, even if it's just the Knights and the Men at Arms. But if you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that in March, or the beginning of March, I have a Napoleonic event that I will be attending, where I need to paint a Russian army for, and currently I have 8 models out of about 360 odd painted. So most of my time for the next couple of months will be focused on that and getting other smaller videos out as well. So I will get to the next one where I will be painting the foot sergeants and the knights as quickly as I can. Hopefully I will be able to work away at them in the background of the main project that is on my hobby desk at the moment, because I want to get this done, but it might just be a little bit more spread out than I would like. So I hope that you will bear with me on that, and that you will enjoy the other videos that I will be putting out regularly in the meantime. And with that said, it's time for a final reveal of my peasant spearmen and peasant bowmen for this project. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I really appreciate you taking the time to view this, and I hope to see you all again in the next one. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy your hobby.